can admit. So, welcome to our advocacy webinar. Today we are taking a European perspective on passenger rail, and we will look at how Europe's rail operators are coping with cross-border travel and tackling the Ukraine crisis. But before I hand it over to the moderator, I would like to say a few words about United Europe. United Europe is a non-profit organization nurturing cross-border cooperation of companies, policymakers, individuals, and especially the young Europeans. Please consider becoming a member so we can continue to drive forward our ambitious agenda of making Europe more united, competitive, and diverse. At these challenging times, it's a must to be a European team. We are stronger together, and in this spirit, I would like to give a special thanks to our advocate, Milena Oschmann, who has been co-organizing this webinar. And now, with no further ado, I would like to hand it over to our moderator, Matthew Parsons. Matthew is a travel editor at Skift, a travel intelligence company where he covers the corporate travel sector with his eyes on the intersection of procurement, technology, and culture. Matthew, please go ahead.
Great, thank you, Divya, and United Europe for inviting me to moderate this panel today. So I'm delighted to welcome our rail industry public affairs experts. So mostly we have here the people with the inside track on all the political wheeling and dealing in the corridors of Brussels. So it's going to be really interesting to hear what they've got to say and what they're lobbying for. For our audience members, please leave any questions in the chat feature, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go on, or we'll leave some time at the end. So I'm just going to jump into some quick introductions for our panel. We have Iga Niznik, who is the EU and International Affairs Manager at Austria's OBB. Dr. Christoph Lerch, Head of Transport Policy for Europe at Deutsche Bahn. Jeremy Pelleran, European Affairs Director at SNCF. And on the other side of the lobbying table, we have Catherine Obst, Deputy Head of Unit, Single European Rail Area Unit, DG MOVE, which is part of the European Commission. I hope I've got those titles right, but welcome everyone. Before we dive in, we have a 1 hour session and we're going to explore the European rail challenges and opportunities. Primarily why it's not quite as popular as flying. But I just wanted to ask each of you, of the rail operators, for a kind of brief update on the relief efforts that you're involved with when it comes to the crisis in Ukraine at the moment. So I don't know if Iga, I can ask you that question to just briefly update us on the latest you're doing, latest work.
Sure. Hello and good evening from Vienna. So ÖBB, Austrian Railways, are trying their best to help in Austria and to support our partners abroad. And right now in Austria, currently we have 4,000 people per day arriving in about 50 trains. Most people come from Hungary, the Czech Republic, Poland, and Slovakia. And most of them continue their journey. And I think everyone in Europe has done that. Also, Austrian Railways give free tickets to Ukrainian displaced persons and refugees. And right now, 21,000 tickets have been issued. And I can say that due to the refugee crisis back in 2015, we'll say build on experience with tackling this kind of situations. So we were able to revitalize our help structures quite quickly. But of course, abroad, outside of Austria, are the places where help is most needed at this moment. And so, for example, we try to support PKP Polish Railways with additional rolling stock. They need additional locos and wagons to bring Ukrainian refugees. Like borders are very crowded in Poland, and they need additional trains to bring people to other places. So here For example, we lended them 5 coaches and we'll lend another 2 locos. And it sounds like something simple and easy, but it's not, because there is like a homologation process that you need to undergo. So your rolling stock can run on foreign railways. Mm-hmm. And the Polish ministry established a simplified procedure. Yeah, so that's it. And actually the big difference between 2015 and today is that in 2015 people were happy to arrive in Western Europe finally, whereas today it's a heartbreaking atmosphere in the train stations.
Okay, all right, thanks for that update. Christoph, can I get an update from you, in terms of Deutsche Bahn?
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew. Also, good evening to everybody. I'm delighted to be here. Of course, the situation in Ukraine, it's horrible. It's still, for me personally, unbelievable what is happening there. Iga has also told us a little bit about her impressions, and this, of course, the same for us. So we, of course, also as Deutsche Bahn, we try to give as much, let's say, solidarity as we can, and the same as for Austrian Railways. Of course, the best we can do is transport offer. So we are also providing free train tickets for people arriving from Ukraine, but also then within Germany and then moving on to other European countries. So at the moment, there is more than 40 connections from our neighboring countries, together with our partners, with Polish Railways, Czech Railways, Austrian Railways, people arriving to Germany. There is around 6,000 to 8,000 yesterday, the figures by train arriving. There is from Poland 2,000 to 3,000, from Czech Republic and Austria. We have this Help Ukraine ticket, which is this free of charge ticket you can get as a Ukrainian refugee in Germany, then for transport within Germany and to move on to other countries. Until yesterday, we have issued 128,000 of those Help Ukraine tickets. We also have buses transporting people directly from Poland and other locations to different locations in Germany. I think the cooperation with our partner railways, I can say that I think for Austrian Railways, Iga, I hope you can confirm, but also for Polish Railways, Czech Railways is really great. So if there is a positive element in this terrible situation, is that solidarity within the whole community, but also our small railway community, I think is very strong. And we help each other where we can. We also, of course, which is very important, is surely the same for the other railway companies. The welcome at the railway stations is very important. So Berlin Central Station is one of the central hubs at the moment, still for people arriving in Germany. And of course, together with a lot of volunteers, with a lot of other organizations, local authorities, we try to do our best to have that terrible moment, at least to give a warm welcome as far as we can. Maybe another aspect is providing humanitarian aid to the people directly in Ukraine. So we have established with our DB Cargo subsidiary company a humanitarian railway bridge from Germany to Ukraine. So the first train arrived 2 days ago in different terminals in Ukraine. I think, as we've all seen 2 days ago, when 3 prime ministers traveled to Kiev, right in the war zone, by train. Train is still still a mean of transport that works quite well, still in the Ukraine. So we use that to provide humanitarian aid as far as we can. It's gathered from private persons, from companies, public authorities, and we try to ship as much as possible to the terminals directly. There is DB Foundation, there is other aspects, temporary leave for Ukrainian staff to help their families. So a lot we try to do, but of course the situation is terrible. So yeah, thanks.
Great. Okay, thanks, Christoph. Jeremy, an update. SNCF obviously working on this as well.
Thank you, Matthew. Good evening to everyone. Of course, we are equally alarmed in France about the situation, the humanitarian situation in Ukraine. and very worried. But the impact for the time being is less important because, of course, we are further west. So we've seen less refugees arriving to France by train. We have counted since Sunday around 10,000 people arriving. But of course, we know that it will increase in the coming weeks. So what we have decided to do as our colleagues from other member states is to grant free tickets for refugees. And of course, there are many people arriving from Germany, also from Belgium, but mainly from Germany, and some of them staying in France, some of them continuing their journey towards Spain. Because actually there is a big Ukrainian community, especially in the area of Madrid and Barcelona. So we have organized further coaches to be able to transport those people who wanted to reach Spain.
Yeah.
We have also installed, as our colleagues, special facilities in the stations to welcome the refugees with volunteers from SNCF and also in cooperation with the Red Cross. And we are also organizing a humanitarian train together with Deutsche Bahn that will depart from Dunkirk, so in the north of France, by the end of this week, and reach Germany, and Deutsche Bahn will bring it to Romania. And then the goods will continue their travel to Ukraine. So that's the situation now.
Okay, great. I've noticed some questions coming up, so we will kind of come to those questions towards the end, but thanks for the question. Interesting themes of collaboration, which I'm sure we're going to come on to later on. Catherine, just an update from you from the European Commission perspective, when it comes to relief efforts and these rail operators. I mean, are they doing enough? I mean, what's your take on all this?
I have to say, from the Commission side, we've been really, really impressed with what the rail companies are doing, and it's obviously a very difficult time for everyone, but it's been really nice to see how the rail sector has very spontaneously and very generously, on their own initiative, started acting. I mean, it sounds here, when you have the railway companies describing what they do, it sounds like they do that because that is their business and so on, but that's not the case. This is all voluntary work. People started running trains without asking how they would be paid for, or this is all at the moment pro bono work. This is something we're very aware of. It's also not just the state operators who are running trains, but we also have private companies who have just spontaneously asked how they can help, and started running trains, often with goods to Ukraine, and then taking refugees back, going back. There's also bus companies operating, so there's a huge communal effort from the transport operators to help, and it's been really, really impressive to see how quickly this was put in place and how well it is working. And it's absolutely crucial, because there's so many people coming that if we didn't have this help and this sort of spontaneous engagement from the sector, it would be very, very messy and very difficult. So this is very, very impressive. I think from the side of the Commission, you're probably very much aware of what we've been doing. So it's the first time we've activated the temporary protection scheme at EU level. So obviously this gives Ukrainian refugees the possibility to come and to settle freely within the EU and have access to education and jobs and so on. So this is the first time we're doing it, but it's very important that the legal status is clear for these people, that there's no questions about waiting around to see if you're allowed to stay or not. It's very, very easy. And of course, we're also putting in place various humanitarian aid and civil protection schemes. There's a lot of funds being activated. So we put out a statement on the 8th of March also on a cohesion action for refugees in Europe. It's called CARE. So this brings together funds under regional development and social funds, which will then also allow the member states, of course, to start coming in properly with financial support.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for those updates. So, like I said, this panel, we're going to talk about, the European rail perspective, passenger perspective, and in particular the kind of we've got 3 countries on this panel talking about cross-border, longer rail trips. The European Commission launched a rail action plan in December. And it's said that cross-border trips account for just 7% of the kilometres travelled by train in Europe. Catherine, I don't know if I can start with you, but why is this such a low figure? And what do you want from this action plan?
First of all, I mean, maybe about that figure, that figure doesn't say that anyone's doing anything wrong, right? That figure just says the main business of railway companies today is, taking, commuters to work and domestic business travelers from A to B. And maybe the main focus of rail companies today is not yet the international travel. It doesn't necessarily mean, that there's a lack of performance or anything on the rail side, but it does mean that we would like to strengthen, we would like people who travel internationally to look at rail as a default option. And what we did in the run up to the study is we looked at the sort of barriers that you encounter as a company if you want to run long distance train services, and the sort of things that that would be in your way. And on that basis, we have come up with 10 actions that basically try to address those barriers. They're quite diverse because rail is a very complex area, so I'll spare you the details, but to go through them, briefly, that you have an idea. One is better implementation of the existing rail legislation, because we have open markets, but only for a very short period. Actually, the domestic passenger markets were only opened fully for competition last December, so 2020. So we're still working with member states to make sure that the legal framework is okay, and we're still encountering obstacles there. There's obviously the sort of technical problems of interoperability, that make it difficult. I was just speaking about the problems of taking rolling stock from one country into another. This is classic problems we have there. Signaling systems, for example, is an important element in that. So we're rolling out a signaling system called ERTMS that will hopefully make that easier. We've proposed a strengthened infrastructure network for rail. So together with the action plan we presented in December, we presented a proposal for a revised version of a law called 10T, it's the Trans-European Transport Networks regulation. And that sort of gives a blueprint of what the infrastructure in Europe should look like. And that strengthens the parameters now for passenger rail by introducing a minimum speed of 160 kilometers per hour for certain passenger lines. And it also has a stronger focus on high-speed networks, especially in the east of Europe. And a better inclusion of airports as well. I think that's quite important, that you have a better focus on modes where you can change transport mode, because this is not about rail against air, it's more about how do you get people to cooperate better. Yeah. Then there's a problem of rolling stock availability. It's not always easy for new companies, especially, to get funding for rolling stock and to buy rolling stock. There's a problem with train drivers and how you're able to use them in different countries. So we're looking at the legislation behind train drivers. Then there's a question of capacity. We're looking at the legal framework as to how, if you want to run a train today, you have to book yourself a train path, right? You can't just decide to drive like on the motorway. So you have to book a train path. And the way those train paths are allocated is quite complex. And at the moment, the legal framework is a little bit rigid. It was built on a system where there was enough capacity for everyone. But today we find that capacity is actually quite scarce and it has to be managed a bit more efficiently. So we're revising that piece of legislation as well. There's a question of track access charges. So you have to pay for your train path. And we find that in particular, passenger trains pay quite high track access charges in many cases. And obviously that brings up the price for the end consumer. So there's a question, especially if you're in competition with aviation, whether that's really the way we want it to be, or whether there's other ways of looking at that. Ticketing is a big issue. So we will come with a legal proposal on ticketing at the end of this year. There's a question of the level playing field with other modes of transport. So everything that is, tax exemptions for aviation sometimes, but not for rail. The fact that a Ryanair ticket costs 40 euros, but the train ticket costs much more. We've addressed some of those questions already with the Fit for 55 package that the Commission put forward last summer. So this is quite a big step. Currently still under negotiation. There's still a question about value-added tax, where there's still a proposal in the pipelines. So this is quite an important issue, I think, for the sector. And then there's an action on clarifying rules around public service obligations, because sometimes they're difficult in cross-border transport, and about getting young people to use trains more. We're working with the colleagues who work on Erasmus to see if to strengthen the rules about how you travel to your destination of Erasmus to make it more attractive to use train. That's not the biggest thing, but it's important that young people start using trains. So that's the action plan. Sorry, it took a while, but that's the action plan.
This is a huge document, and I'm sure the European Commission publishes a lot of documents, and this is just one, and there's a lot in there. Interesting to hear a lot about the infrastructure and ticketing. Jeremy, from your perspective, what did you make of the action plan? I mean, does it tally with your priorities?
I would say, as far as SSF is concerned, we broadly support the action plan. We share the same vision as the Commission on the strong role for rail in the future of cross-border mobility. And this is, and we completely agree that there is still a lot to do to improve the situation. Of course, now we need to look at each of the actions that Katrina has described. Some of them would be complicated to implement, others will be easier. If you take, for example, the issue of track access charges, this is an important issue in France because we have very high track access charges. But it's also a way to finance investments in infrastructure. So if you decrease track access charges, you must find other sources of financing to finance infrastructure investments. So this is a tricky issue. And although we are in a period where you see public spending increasing following COVID and probably following also the Ukraine crisis and Ukraine war, nevertheless, we are not reassured when we look at the long term, when we have a public debt that has severely increased and that must have to be reduced in the longer term. So of course, those are tricky issues, and we need to work together with the Commission to really improve the situation and get to have more passengers traveling across Europe.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Iga, from your perspective, do you agree with the action plan, or have you got any other priorities on the agenda?
We highly welcome the action plan, and actually against the background of the war in Ukraine, some now see the EU Green Deal as a luxury. So actually, we stand ready to defend the European ambition and the action plan. So that that in short, we believe it's a very positive step towards sustainable mobility. And if you want me to criticize the European Commission, I'm always ready to do that. So perhaps there are 2 points I would like to stress. Like, firstly, on the level playing field, we would have loved a little bit more ambition, let's say, but it's a good start. And secondly, what really worries us, what really worries my CEO every day is the lack of financing. Like, how should we get there? Because, and here the TEN-T regulation, it already has been mentioned, is really key. Like, the modal shift, like, we need the infrastructure to do it, and where the trains can run. And here we need money for the network. We need money for the digitalization to make things more efficient. And here simply we don't see the investment, and we are worried. Like, okay, in Vienna, in Austria, we are fine because we have a very rail-friendly government at the moment. But if we leave it to the member states to finance all those things, we're afraid it's not going to happen. Perhaps in Eastern Europe, there could be other priorities. So we are afraid that Europe could be, torn apart between East and West. And here we see the big need of public investment.
Okay, interesting. Catherine, I'm sure we'll come to you to discuss that that point. But Christoph, from your perspective, the action plan, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I, of course, agree with pretty much everything which has been said before by my colleagues from Austria and France. We also very much welcome the action plan. We think that this is really pointing into the right direction. We welcome this clear commitment of the European Commission to foster cross-border transport in Europe. Of course, we have the same ambition to also bring that forward. There are some aspects which we particularly support. This is, of course, the mentioning of the level playing field. I agree with Iga that, of course, maybe more ambition could be good, but still it is very good to have, for example, this aspect of value-added tax addressed. It is still a strange situation that for flights within Europe, there is no value-added tax, and for many cross-border trains, there still is. So this is something which is, I think, difficult to explain in those times. So I think it's very good that the Commission wants to tackle that. Of course, the member states are very important in that field, but an initiative by the Commission is very much welcomed, also by Deutsche Bahn. Also the improvement of the infrastructure, which is, as Katrin has said, addressed in this other proposals than on the Trans-European network. Transport is very important. It's a very ambitious proposal by the Commission. And we, of course, agree that we need to enhance the infrastructure, that we need to close the gaps in international connections and infrastructure. This is very welcomed. And I think the infrastructure is, in a way, the mother of rail transport. Without the infrastructure, we can't run attractive services. And so that's definitely the important priority at the moment. We also very much welcome the initiatives on fostering interoperability in terms of technical interoperability. The Commission, the European Union has done a lot already, but there is still some steps to be done. And that's also addressed in the action plan. Also this interoperability in terms of staff, which is addressed in the Train Drivers Directive. It's also a very important initiative. So many aspects have, I think, really addressed the key points. Well, maybe one aspect where we don't completely agree is the area of ticketing. We also believe that ticketing is very important. Maybe we'll come to that a little bit further later on in the discussion. We need to do more as a railway sector. But we are not in favor of legal measures in that regard. But that's one aspect. I think the same goal, but maybe different ways how to reach this goal to make traveling by train more attractive and make ticketing more attractive. Yeah. So I think there is a lot of homework to be done by, let's say, public political stakeholders, I think, but also by the railways. Of course, we also have to do our homework to improve the quality of service to make traveling more attractive.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks. I guess it's in everyone's interest to have a level playing field, because otherwise you're not going to have people traveling so much between countries. And the infrastructure, you know, again, I guess it's all about what comes down to money. Catherine, what's your kind of response to that then? I mean, who pays for making all these rail connections consistent? I mean, is the EC responsible, or is it the member states individually to pump money into their infrastructure? I mean, what would you say to Iga's point earlier?
Well, there's always an interesting question if you start discussing whether it's the European Union that pays or the member states. The money is at the end of the day the same, right? The European level has the money that the member states decided to give the European level in long-term budget discussions. So at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money, and whether it comes from one level or the other is maybe not the most relevant question. From the Commission side, I mean, we invest very heavily in rail infrastructure. I think it's right what everyone said, that the infrastructure is really key. You can't run a good train service if the infrastructure is not good. And if we look at our modeling for how we how we progress towards decarbonization, the completion of the TEN-T network is the major point. So without that, we will not reach zero carbon. So this is very important. From the Commission side, we have the normal Connecting Europe funds, which is a significant amount of money that we invest in cross-border projects and so on. And we've also just injected, as part of the COVID recovery, close to 50 billion just dedicated for rail rail projects. And this is more money than we've ever had under the Connecting Europe facility. So we're actually really spending a lot at the moment. Then that said, compared to what member states have to spend, that is still a not so significant amount compared to the effort that needs to be made. And it's also correct what Jeremy said, that it's very easy to demand lower track access charges, but of course they can only go down if the infrastructure still needs to be funded. So then there still needs to be state funding. So it is a difficult discussion. It's always a difficult discussion where money comes from, but it is clear that funding needs to be found for rail.
Okay, great. I think it was Jeremy who mentioned the kind of the ticketing aspect. So I'm just wondering if you think enough's being done between the rail companies when it comes to the ticket data. So is it easy to book, cross country rail tickets on one platform, or do some of the rail operators perhaps want to keep hold of that customer and not really share that data? I mean, do you think this is an issue, Catherine?
I mean, there's different things we would like from ticketing. It's important that I think you look at ticketing from the passenger perspective. That's who we're doing it for, and it's important to get it right, because people will only take the train if it's easy for them to find the information, which trains are available, if it's easy to book the ticket, and if you know that you're going to not be in trouble if you miss a connection. People find changing trains very stressful sometimes, and realistically, if you're traveling over longer distances, it's very rare that it's like one train that takes you from A to B. You're going to have to change trains. So if you're combining train offers between Deutsche Bahn and ÖBB, or SNCF and Deutsche Bahn, you need to know that if something goes wrong and you miss a train, you're not going to be left on your own. I think that's sort of relatively basic. And to be fair to the rail companies, I think a lot of work has been done in the last years. So there are many things, especially on the question of data exchanges, that have got better. For example, you have things like, Christoph will be better able to explain this, but the age of a child, what is a child in France and what is a child in Germany is not necessarily the same. And that used to be a major stumbling block in selling each other's tickets. But today the systems can basically talk to each other in a way that you're then asked to enter specifically what age your child is, but then afterwards the system knows and can find you the correct ticket. So these things are fine. Mm-hmm. And I think the companies are really working together well to make progress. What we see that is missing is when it gets commercially sensitive, right? So these are companies that are in competition with each other sometimes. Obviously, Deutsche Bahn and ÖBB not so much, but if you were to take Deutsche Bahn and Flixtrain, or ÖBB and Westbahn, people who are in the same market, then it's not so evident that you would want to sell your competitors' tickets. Why would you want to do that, right? You're supposed to be in competition. But as a passenger, you still want to be able to find the complete offer somewhere and buy those tickets. And I think that's where the legislation is needed, because it's not actually fair to expect the companies to behave in a sort of, counter-competitive way. We've asked them to compete, so they compete. But at the same time, that competition is producing an effect we don't want. So I think we will need legislation to overcome that. Same goes for journey continuation. At the moment, it's not even, you don't know as a passenger very often. You have to really read in the small print whether if you miss your connection, you have some form of protection. Normally you actually do. There are agreements between some companies, but it's always not clear with which companies and for which trains. And it's just very, intransparent, and it's also difficult for other people to resell those tickets. And it would just be good to have a clear understanding that if you miss a train, you're going to be okay, you can take the next train. I don't think it changes much in the way the companies are working, but we need a better transparency on that and a better communication to passengers that they have that right, and then more people will want to take the train, I think. So I think it's good for everyone.
Definitely. And Igor, I don't know if I can turn to you, talking about ticketing. I know in Austria there's one ticket called I think it's called the climate ticket, which kind of offers unlimited travel. I mean, at Skift we write a lot about kind of the subscription packages which hotels are launching and even airlines. What's your take on offering those maybe, more to people who want to perhaps travel into other countries from Austria? Would that work on a subscription basis?
That's a tough question. I can tell you that the climate ticket has been very well received in Austria. What is the climate ticket? You can, with the climate ticket, for €3 per day, so that's like about 1,100 euros in a year, you can travel whole Austria. It's like an all-you-can-ride ticket in a way, and you can take any bus and train. It's great, and it's even cheaper for families or for different age groups. It has been very, very well received, but this also comes at a price. So of course the taxpayer has to finance that, and our Minister of Climate made it possible after having predecessors for 15 years not being able to do it. So it was 2 long years of negotiations with regional and local structures to integrate everything. And of course, this touches the public service obligation legislation. I don't want to, tire our auditors with technicalities, but yeah, if there is a will, there is a railway, but it's tough. So this would be my response on the climate ticket. But in addition, I would like to comment briefly on the ticketing issue and on the ticketing roadmap. Sometimes it sounds like the state railways, the incumbents are like bad students because they are so slow in implementing cross-border ticketing. But at the same time, as Catherine just said before, it's only a very small share, the international connections. So let's say the 95% of income comes from national connections. So the focus on improvements has always been under national connections. So this is the first point. And then the second point is like the whole climate debate put us in a very new context and created a huge potential demand for cross-border tickets, and railways stand ready to make that possible, but we need a little bit more time to implement it. So I think this is the point where we stand at.
Okay.
And yeah.
So infrastructure maybe is a work in progress, or you get up to date, and then also the ticketing is the next part. Jeremy, in terms of ticketing, are you happy with how you offer tickets? And there's a question here actually from Ulrich, who says, why can't we take a similar approach for flights? The airlines are in competition, yet you can buy tickets for any route. What's your take on that, in terms of offering a kind of flight style ticket experience or booking experience? I think you're on mute, Jeremy.
Sorry, I wanted to first react on what Catherine said. Indeed, there's a margin for improvement, and we acknowledge it. I think we're working together very strongly to bring improvements, and Inga mentioned the ticketing roadmap. But I wanted to underline what already exists in terms of journey continuation. For example, we joined forces for high-speed connections with Deutsche Bahn, SNCB, Eurostar, NS in the Netherlands, ÖBB, SBB, and Thalys. We've created a rail team alliance, and the rail team alliance allows each passenger to board without a charge on the next available train if they miss a connection. So there's already something coming from the industry directly to provide a solution to these cases of cross-border travel. So it's not as if there was nothing done by the sector in this area. In terms of ticketing, of course, there are different approaches, but there is, of course, each railway operator has his own ticketing system. And we have a big platform in France, which is called SNCF Connect, which has very much developed in the last years to offer connections to local public transport in France. So the focus was indeed firstly on domestic, but it's also a way to sell through this platform international railway tickets. And of course, we also work with third parties, so ticket vendors. So for example, Trainline is selling SNCF tickets. And we, I mean, cooperation with ticket vendors is governed also by competition law. So it means that if you grant the right to sell your tickets to one ticket vendor, you must also grant under the same conditions to other ticket vendors. So this is something that is done. And of course, there needs to be contractual arrangements, contracts for distribution done with third parties. But this is something that is already in place. So it's not that you can only purchase your SNCF ticket from SNCF Connect. You can also go to other platforms. And so the reality is that it already exists. I don't say it's perfect. I think there is a margin for improvement, but the market is really reacting now to the development of cross-border passenger transport. And as Christophe said a bit earlier, probably regulation is not needed now. There's a need to see, with the development of competition in the different member states, how the market evolves, and how ticket vendors will gain also market share on the national markets. In our view, it seems a bit early to legislate on these matters, because the things are really changing at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks for that. Going to turn to sustainability briefly, and Catherine mentioned this, the Fit for 55 proposals, which I think is to have a reduction in carbon emissions by 55% by 2030. Now, what I thought was interesting in terms of the kind of the COVID impact was, Air France having state aid, and one of the conditions for the money from the government was to stop, short haul flights. I think flights under 2.5 hours, and I think Austria had a similar thing. And obviously, the rail companies are stepping up. So, Christophe, I don't know if I can turn to you, to talk about how you work with Lufthansa, for example. I mean, it's still seen as a quite, a prestigious flight to take, if you're a business traveler, for example, a short haul flight. But are you kind of taking more share from the airlines, or are you working with them as, in a more collaborative way?
Yeah, thanks, Matthew, for the question. I think it has not been mentioned so prominently yet, but intermodality, I think, is also key when we're discussing how to reach the climate targets and how to offer attractive services. And so we also believe that close cooperation with airlines, also they are of course competitors, is very important. And we try to do that as many other railway companies. With Lufthansa and with others in Germany. So there has been even a so-called action plan with the Association of the Railway Companies in Germany last year. And one of the important offers we are making is so-called Lufthansa Express Rail, which means that the common aim in this regard is to reduce CO2 emissions. So also Lufthansa recognizes that for short haul flights, there isn't always a good room here, and they should be, let's say, abolished as much as possible. There is no regulatory measures in place in Germany. They are not planned, to my knowledge, at the moment by the German government. So a little bit different from the situation maybe in France. But of course, also the German authorities, they very much welcome a close cooperation, which in the end leads to less flights, to leads to more passengers taking the trains to get to the big hubs, and then maybe take a flight, of course, to other continents where we can't really offer an attractive train connection yet, at least. So that's why there's a close cooperation. Lufthansa Express Rail means that at the moment we have the offer from 24 cities in Germany to have a rail connection to Frankfurt, which is the main hub, which is Lufthansa's main hub. And you have, let's say, a code share, one can say. You have one ticket, it's a Lufthansa ticket with a Lufthansa ticket number, and you can use that. You can check in before you board the train in Berlin, for example, if that's where you are coming from, and then you take the train from Berlin to Frankfurt with your Lufthansa ticket. You have special conditions also on the train. There is even special staff on the train to care for those traveling, for those, let's say, flight passengers traveling on our trains. So they pretty much feel as if they are flying already. We are also going fast. So that's what we try to have as a customer experience. And then in Frankfurt, there is also very good infrastructure. There is an air rail terminal, so very close to the rail station. There is a specific terminal where you can then check in, you deposit your luggage, and a quite short way of walking to the terminals. So that's where we really try to offer, together with Lufthansa, a very attractive customer experience. It helps both partners. Of course, it helps us to have more passengers in our services, in our trains. On the other hand, it also helps Lufthansa to show that they are working to improve their climate balance also, and to concentrate on the routes where it is really where it really makes sense to fly. Yeah. So I think that's the way forward. We are trying to improve this cooperation and enlarge the cooperation, and we see that it really works, and it helps to reduce those flights, those short flights within Germany.
Okay, great. And Jeremy, from SNCF, I guess you're working with Air France a lot. I mean, is there a huge uptake in those rail journeys because of Air France being told you can't do these routes anymore?
Actually, the routes where the ban is imposed, rail had already a significant market share. What I should outline is that market works when there is a good offer, quality offer with high frequency and short duration of the trip. Of course, it's much easier to go from center to center, city center to city center, without going to the airport and having transfers back to the city and to the city and back to the city. So of course, there's always the issue of price, and maybe we come back to that, because here on issue of level playing field, it has been already said in terms of taxation, in terms of internalization of external costs, but the market itself, even without this level playing field that does not exist yet, works in terms of attracting passengers to high-speed connections that are really reliable, fast, and working very well. And we've seen that already in the lines before they were banned, like Paris Bordeaux or Paris Lyon. Where rail had already a very, very, very significant market share. In terms of complementarity also with airlines, we have a very similar situation in France as the one described by Christophe. We have a partnership with 12 airlines where we can buy a ticket combining long distance flight with train tickets. Connecting at the moment 19 cities in France, and also Brussels is part of this offer.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And so, quick question for you, Catherine. I mean, you've got these quite ambitious carbon reduction goals, for the member states. What's stopping the European Union kind of just doing more of this, banning short-haul flights? I mean, will it maybe come to that, and to really push people towards rail?
I think, as a principle, it's not very nice to tell people that you have to ban something that they're not allowed to move. That I think as an institution, we don't really believe in in that, so I think it's a little bit like Jeremy said, either there's an attractive alternative and then people will take the train anyway, or there is no attractive alternative, and then you shouldn't tell people that they can't fly, because then they need to fly. So I think the way to do this is to improve the offer, and I think what the railways are doing in working with the airlines works very well. I think you see in Europe on a number of connections, like, you know, Brussels Paris, or Brussels Frankfurt, Brussels London, that where the infrastructure is good and the services are good, it's totally feasible for railways to to basically replace those flights. And I think the railways have that market well in view. I think that sort of distance of up to 4 hours is something that the railways have been focusing on for a long time. And I think, you know, the more infrastructure is being built, for example, in Germany, you now just had the completion of the Munich-Berlin link, and that's brought down journey times considerably. And you can see that it has a real impact on passenger numbers. So I think these things work really, really well. What I don't see yet being properly in focus is the sort of normal, more sort of touristic traveler, right? Someone who wants to go to Barcelona for the Easter holidays, and then finds it very difficult to find a train offer. And I think it's true what Iga was saying, that like you have, it's new that this is coming back into focus for railways. I think they've been much further before. If you look at the offer, the EU Rail has just turned 50, I think, this week, right? So it's and the Interrail ticket is amazing. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a fabulous offer. It's way broader than most people know. So my parents have just bought themselves an Interrail ticket, right? Because you don't have to be young to do Interrail anymore. And that works fantastically. And if you could have something like that you have these special offers for people who want to go somewhere on holidays, who are not very rich business travelers, but who are price sensitive. And then you had, you know, more offers like that, not to go like to 10 different destinations, but just to go there and back. I think that would, for example, make a huge difference. So it's things like that where I think there's still more work, that could be done, but that's a commercial question for the sector. I mean, that's not something that we can legislate on, obviously, but I think there's still, you know, an extra bit that we can still go to make it more attractive for people to travel there.
Yeah, okay. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes left, so I did say we would try and go through some of the questions, and there have been lots. So I want to kind of just whiz through them, if that's okay, from the top downwards. Going back to the crisis in Ukraine, there's a question that says, basically, when people get into Berlin, they want tickets to go to other European countries. The Help Ukraine ticket is very good, but does not help there. Is there any kind of response? I mean, are you getting more rail operators on board with these tickets? Maybe Catherine?
I think that's more for the companies.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, if I may, Matthew, the Help Ukraine ticket. If you arrive in Berlin, for example, from Poland, you can get the Help Ukraine ticket in Berlin in the train station simply by showing your Ukrainian passport, and you pay €0. And you can use the Help Ukraine ticket within Germany, all destinations, but also with all our long distance connections to the neighboring countries. So, for example, it works in the Aleo Corporation to France. You can go to Austria, to any other destination where you wanna go. So there are quite some flows, for example, to France, as Jeremy has mentioned, and then also
really works. Yeah.
onwards.
Yeah.
So basically, the ticket is accepted in all the long distance connections offered by Deutsche Bahn, and it's accepted by all railway companies in Germany, also within our association. So basically, the possibility is there to move on. Of course, it's sometimes not easy to get all the information. It sometimes takes maybe a little bit of time to know where you want to go, where you're heading exactly. But of course, we try to offer as much as we can the support, and all the volunteers try to help as well. But the ticket is there, basically, the offer.
Okay. And then the other question was, what is the direction of travel? So I guess what are the main movements from Germany? Where are people kind of heading towards?
The direction of travel. So I think it's basically France is an important aim, but many people some also stay in Germany, but it's quite difficult actually to sort out the exact figures. I think no one has really a complete overview. I think also the Commission doesn't have it, also the German government doesn't have it, because as you probably know, you don't have to register yet. So there is at least 90 days you can move. Katrin mentioned the legal background, so you can move freely within the European Union. And many people, of course, they have relatives, they have friends where they directly go, where they stay, as you all know. So there is no complete, let's say, overview of the cases. But we can see that, of course, the number of people of refugees coming from Poland, for example, is growing. And we are trying to expand the offer. I think the other companies are doing as well, working on that. Iga mentioned that ÖBB is let's say, providing train sets to the Polish railways and so on and so forth. So we, of course, expect more and more people arriving, and we try to prepare for that. But the issue is, of course, that also the public authorities have to be also very fast to let's say, provide us as transport companies with the destinations where people can travel if they don't have a specific aim themselves yet.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Jump down to one question. Someone working for a travel management company that works with multinational companies who want travelers living in one EU country flying to another EU country to be able to book rail online within that travel agency's booking tool, and apparently that's currently very limited. As I'm trying to learn all I can about EU rail, is this a recurring call? So I guess, is this a question that comes up if you're booking, say, with a travel agency in the US and you want to book flights and then rail? Is that possible through one booking platform? If anyone wants to pick that one up.
Well, I think here, if I may, one really would have to look at the specific case. There is, as Jeremy has mentioned, we have, as Deutsche Bahn and all the other companies as well, we have cooperations with a lot of platforms. But of course, it doesn't cover all the platforms. It's based on commercial agreements, and we see it as a complementary offer. Of course, we sell the majority of our tickets through our own channel, which is in Germany, which is bahn.de. Which is, as far as I know, the most frequently used travel platform in Germany. So it's quite a popular platform. Many people like that platform. They want to use it. And we try to enlarge the offer in our platform. But of course, we also try to have, in a complementary way, those agreements and commercial agreements and cooperations with other platforms. But yeah, looking at the specific case, one would have to look to check exactly which platform it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great stuff. We're almost coming to the end of the panel, so I'm going to get through all the questions. I mean, it just sounds like there's huge amounts of work being done, behind the scenes, and lots of reports and action plans, and it seems like there's a lot of work ahead. But I don't know if I could ask each of you just to kind of sum up, I guess, main takeaway from this panel, and perhaps the next. Your priority for the year ahead. Iga, if I can start with you.
Continue the dialogue. Continue in a good spirit of the European Year of Rail. Work together with colleagues from the sector, and work together with the legislator and create common understanding and find common solutions through dialogue. Okay,
great. Katrin, you're kind of, well, obviously you've got the action plan in place, but I mean, what's kind of top of the agenda for this year?
I think top of the agenda is trying to make rail the default mode of transport that people want to use when they move around Europe. And I think the railways have a fantastic network as it is. It's a really good product. It's a very attractive service. So there's a huge amount of things that are really good. And now it's a question of making it better for those people that we're not yet reaching. And some of that is obviously up to the companies on their own. Some of that is up to member states. because funding is an issue. Some of the ticketing things are domestic, and some of that is up to the Commission. And of course, we're not interested in starting something out of the blue and deciding to run our trains ourselves. I mean, we want to work with the sector and build on what is already there, and then see that it is, takes a shape that really meets everyone's expectations, so that this becomes the most attractive mode of transport.
Okay,
Thanks.
default mode. Christoph, your kind of closing statement or your priority?
Thank you, Matthew. I can, of course, completely underline what Katrin has said. We, of course, want to make, also coming back to the headline of this seminar, we want to make rail the #1 transport mode in Europe. I think railways really have a big chance at the moment. There is a window of opportunity. There is a lot of public support, which we see from the public, from the political stakeholders. The climate discussion, of course, is helping a lot, is raising awareness. And I think at the moment, pretty much everyone agrees that rail is important also, and is part of the solution to reach the climate goals, the Green Deal goals, the climate goals of Europe and also worldwide. So I think there is a lot of support, and so what we need is, we really appreciate the initiatives to improve level playing field, to help in terms of infrastructure, as has been mentioned, as a key and decisive factor. And on the other hand, we are of course happy and ready to do our homework in terms of improving quality of service, in terms of working towards an intelligent European network with intelligent hubs to connect the cities in Europe, the main cities and the regions. And we have to work on intermodality as well, in terms of close cooperation, for example, with airlines, as has been discussed, but also to improve door-to-door mobility. So also to have good solutions for the last mile. And I think if we provide that, we can reach that aim to be #1 mode of transport in Europe.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you, Christoph. Jeremy, your kind of final statement.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm concurring with Catherine and my colleagues. I mean, at SNCF, we have the objective to double the traffic for rail passenger transport and for rail freight transport. So that also includes for passengers cross borders. So this is a very important objective. But to reach this objective, we need to work all together and put a lot of effort, as explained by Christoph, also in the quality of service. But we need also significant investments. Today, rail infrastructure is not able to carry such an increase of modal share. So there's need for improvement, modernization of the networks, new high-speed lines, new tracks to go around the cities, and so on and so on. And I think we all share the political objective. We've seen emissions from the transport sector still increasing. They represent 25 to 30% of the CO2 emissions in the EU. We need to act on that, and rail is part of the solution. But we still have a lot to do if you want to achieve this objective. So a lot of commitments are needed, both from the sector and also from policymakers, because eventually they decide in what mode they will invest.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, well, so I want to thank you all again for this hour-long discussion. I think there's been some very frank views expressed, and I found it really interesting. In terms of how you're all collaborating, and then not just amongst the yourselves, but with other kind of modes of transport. So yeah, really interesting. So thank you, everyone, and again, thank you to United Europe for organising the panel. So I think I will pass it back over to Dirya, maybe, to finish things off.
Well, thank you everyone for participating. Great fascinating discussion, great panelists, and even the audience, we had so much engagement. So thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
All the best.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.